Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for tuning in. I am a little early today. I do apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused, and if anyone has already set their alarm for 5:30, I do apologize. My schedule had conflicted times. However, I still wanted to be consistent in delivering thoughtful Thursday moments for traumatic brain injury in education this week. My name is Letitia Council, and I am the founder of the Najas Foundation. I am also the author of Hope for Grieving Mothers 12-Day Devotional Journal that you can now order straight from Amazon. I'm so excited to make that announcement as well. I am also three times best-selling author in three different anthologies, and it has been a great journey to become an author. And I know that there's so much more. So I'm not going to delay the time any longer. And I give God honor and great thanks for this day. For there's not another day like today that we will see again. So I give him honor on today for being ahead of my life and for loving me the way that he does. We're going to talk about this day. Today, we're going to talk about the myths and misunderstandings about traumatic brain injury. And this is very common when someone is being diagnosed with traumatic brain injury. Traumatic brain injury, also known as TBI, and its causes, symptoms, treatments, and prognosis are often misunderstood. This can lead to an incomplete medical evaluation and treatment recommendations. Traumatic brain injury is a public health issue. Traumatic brain injury occurs 8 times more frequently than breast cancer, AIDS, spinal cord injury, and multiple sclerosis, all combined. That's huge. Despite its world spread impact, there remains several myths and misunderstandings. And I have four common myths that are typically talked about, and they're not true. So, myth number one is you cannot have a TBI without loss of consciousness. That is not true. Do not believe what you see because it's not true. The issue of TBI and loss of consciousness has been misunderstood far and wide for years, even among physicians. See, physicians make mistakes too. We're human and we make mistakes. That misunderstanding has been exploited by insurance companies looking to avoid responsibilities and denying payment for medical need health care services by claiming that since the person did not lose conscience, there is no treatment needed for alleged brain injury. However, medical organizations have now clearly stated and concluded that a traumatic brain injury does not require a loss of consciousness. In fact, the CDC and other leading to change a person's mental state and awareness without loss of consciousness is in fact a concussion, and a concussion is a traumatic brain injury. This is a myth. This is indeed a myth. Myth number two, if there is no brain bleed visible on the MRI or CT scans, then there is no TBI. When a CT is taken and the radiologists note it as normal, it simply means there is no skull fracture or visible brain bleeding. The same is true for an MRI. A negative CT or MRI does not rule out brain injury. It does not rule out brain injury. Just because they don't see it, they should not be ruling it out at all. Both the CT and MRI are looking at the structure of the brain, not the function of the brain. And this is why they should not rule out an injury. Also, a CT or MRI scan may lack the sensitivity, specified or strength to record what is happening on the microscopic level of the brain cells. Excuse me. It's important to re-emphasize that CTs and MRIs are looking for changes to the structure of the brain and not the brain's function. There are other types of tests that will evaluate function, but those are usually not done right away following a traumatic brain injury. And I really wonder why that is so. But again, this is just a myth. So we cannot always believe what it is that we're hearing from someone. Myth number 3, symptoms of TBI must immediately show up after the traumatic injury, or the traumatic event, excuse me. Insurers responsible for the individual or group that caused the TBI will try to avoid financial responsibility by arguing that if TBI symptoms do not immediately appear following the traumatic event, such as a fall or a motor vehicle crash, then the person must not have a TBI. This is definitely a myth. However, following an injury, the brain, like many other parts of the body, may or may not respond with immediate symptoms. There may be a delayed onset symptom when there is a disruption of the actual brain cells and their connections to the brain cells. Symptoms such as a headache, dizziness, fogginess, and etc. may take many hours, days, or weeks after an injury to first appear. Also, an individual may not realize the full effects of the symptoms because of initial shock-like experience following trauma, or until they engage in their usual activities at school or work or home that require their usual thinking abilities. God bless you, Claudette. Thank you for tuning in from the Eastern Shore, Virginia. And the 4th myth, all doctors are equal in their understanding of how to evaluate and treat TBIs, even emergency room physicians. All doctors are not equal because every doctor did not go to study to be a neurosurgeon or in the neural field of medicine. Not all doctors did that. So some are not aware of everything that could happen, or some are not able to evaluate and treat TBIs right away. So that's why they refer out to see a neurologist or another specialist. All doctors do not have the same training or understanding of TBIs and do not have the same skills in its proper evaluation and treatment. A 2018 research paper on brain injury found that the diagnosis of mild TBIs, which is the most common form, was frequently absent from the emergency room records and discharge instructions, even when patients reported symptoms of brain trauma. Wow. And this is the reason why a lot of brain injuries go misdiagnosed at times, because every doctor does not have the knowledge and understanding to evaluate and treat brain injuries. So they go undiagnosed because of the CTs and the MRIs that's just showing the structure of the brain. But a brain injury is not just from the structure of the brain, it's also from the function of the brain. The brain is not properly functioning correctly after an injury. So this is why they go misdiagnosed and they put it off as a headache. It's more than just a headache. Headaches tend to occur frequently over time, and something is just not right. And that person knows that their body, they know how their body function. and they know that these headaches are not normal. So yes, it is best to go and get a second opinion, because misdiagnosis happen all the time. Now we're going to talk about the symptoms of traumatic brain injury. Medical providers label TBI as either mild, moderate, or severe. Janasia had a severe TBI because of her accident, the car accident. She hit her head, I still believe, on the steering wheel, and she went unconscious. And her brain began to swell up, and she had some bleeding of the brain, and the swelling had nowhere to go. And just from her MRIs and her CT scans, they noticed immediately, yes, the function of her brain was not right. So she was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. This helps physicians and other healthcare professions when communicating with one another, particularly in emergency situations or when providing treatment in a hospital setting. A severe brain injury means that there is a structural change to the skull. And Janasia, also known as Nasia, had to have her right frontal bone flap removed, and that was right here up the side of her head, right here of the brain. And an acute brain bleed that can be fatal if not assessed and treated as a medical emergency. A severe TBI often requires immediate transport of the patient to a Trauma One center for life-saving brain injury care, which often includes surgery. And we are very grateful and thankful for Sentara Norfolk General, who does have a Trauma One center right here in the city of Norfolk. And that's where Janasia spent her 28 and a half days at. And she had to have a major brain surgery to have her brain flap removed in order for the swelling to have somewhere to go, so that the swelling could then decrease because of the flow. If the swelling just continued to expand, it would have had nowhere to go, and that would have caused some severity and even death in that moment. But because God was already right there working things out on her behalf, some things began to take place in her healing in the hospital immediately. And the doctor came back to tell us less than 12 hours later that he's able to perform surgery, which 12 hours prior to, he told us that he was not able to perform surgery because it wouldn't have made a 50-50 difference in her life. So we thank God for God being who he is. And her surgery went well. She came out strong as a trooper, no complications, no anything. And because that happened, the expansion of her bone flap being removed, it gave the swelling places to flow. And the way that the doctor explained it was the swelling is going to expand just because it's flowing, but it will soon decrease. And it did happen. Her head did go, the swelling in her head did increase, but we also seen where it began to decrease. And with a mild TBI, there is likely no visible structure damage or brain bleed, but there can be functional problems in how the brain works. Yeah, you hit your head and you're not right. I recall having a coworker one time who had a mild TBI, and she had to be out of work for at least 8 weeks just because the function of her brain was not working properly, and she had to seek that medical attention. No, she didn't have any brain bleeds, but this was also prior to me finding out more about TBIs. No, she didn't have any brain bleeds or anything, but the function of the brain was not functioning properly as it was prior to her getting mild TBI. A great majority of TBIs are labeled mild TBIs. The word mild describes only the initial insult relative to the degree of neurological severity or need for brain surgery. They say mild because they do not want to do brain surgery and they don't feel as if brain surgery is necessary. So, um, the use of the word mild followed by traumatic brain injury seems incompatible to many, including the person with the injury. A mild TBI means there is no need for surgery, but can certainly mean that the person has an ongoing difficulties, headaches, um, memory loss, difficulty speaking. But we're going to get into some more of that later on throughout the slides and the education that I am providing this evening. Here's some more symptoms. Regardless of the medical organization's definitions and descriptions of a TBI as mild, moderate, or severe, there is a range of common symptoms that may result and with different degrees of severity and duration. These symptoms are experienced as physical, cognitive, and or emotional and behavioral. Physical problems are headaches, dizziness, and balance of difficulties, fatigue, nausea, and vomiting, visual, auditory changes, and sleep difficulties. Nasia didn't have too many nights of sleep difficulties, but there were some nights in the middle of the night I can get up out the bed and do my routine checks in on her, and she might was being sleeping lightly, but she wasn't real sleeping heavy. And then those were the nights that she was sleeping heavy, and I come in the room and she was completely sleep. So these are some physical problems that do happen. Her cognitive problems, memory loss, disorientation, lack of concentration, distractibility, difficulty with decision making, problem solving, and organizing tasks, forgetfulness, changes in speech pattern, word retrieval difficulty. That means they don't they have problems getting their words out of their mouth, and reading difficulty, difficulty in expressing oneself, and difficulty in understanding verbal communication. We experienced pretty much all of these because Nasia was not able to verbally communicate with us. And we had to go off of her facial expression for the most part. So we did experience a lot of cognitive problems throughout our journey. Easily irritated and angered, frustration, depression, and lack of motivation, mood swings such as feeling sad, anxious, or letless, personality changes, and difficulties initiating and following through activities. On the emotional side of our story, I didn't see too much anger in Nasia's face or anything, but she was kind of frustrated sometimes, and she would express that through her facial expressions. Not too short mood swings, again, because of her level of TBI and her severity. We couldn't really dictate her mood swings. And now we're going to talk about is concussions the same as a traumatic brain injury. The word concussion and the phrase traumatic brain injury are frequently used to describe an event in which the head is struck or strikes something. In the past, suffering a concussion was often misunderstood as having your bells rung. I found that very interesting when I was putting the slides together and reading this. Oh, yeah, she always made some mean faces as well. But she did it all out of love. And because she was not able to verbally respond anymore like she used to, she recognized that as well. However, as a result of increased understanding of neuroscience of the brain, concussion is now taken more seriously, particularly by athletes, parents, coaches, and military personnel. Concussions and traumatic brain injury are now terms used interchangeably because a concussion represents a mild brain injury. This new understanding is illustrated by the CDC mantra that a concussion is a traumatic brain injury and brain injury should be taken seriously. Yes, they should be. They should not be taken lightly. A widely used definition of a concussion or a mild TBI comes from the 1993 definition by the American College of Rehabilitation Medicine. It defines concussions as a patient with a mild TBI is a person who has had a traumatically induced physiological disruption of the brain function. It was a mouthful. With at least one of the following: any periods of loss of consciousness, any loss of memory for events immediately before or after the accident, any alterations in mental status at the time of the accident. Sometimes they can tell, especially if the person is off, if it happens just like that and they're completely off, you can tell that there has been an alteration in their mental status. Or this is actually saying state, but I work in the medical field, so it's an alteration in mental status, and it's the same thing as a mental state. And now the conclusion is of all of this is the evaluation and treatment of all types of traumatic brain injuries are important because of the immediate or delayed impact to an individual's function, school, daily activities, and obligation with family, work, and self-health. TBIs require timely, effective, and different diagnostic and treatment approaches to ensure the best and quickest recovery, because not one or two TBIs are the same. And that's why they are different diagnostic and treated differently. And here's our slide in ways to contact us. And we are the NAJAS Foundation. We're living their lives through our minds. So that basically just sums it up to say, we're imagining that our minds are in their bodies. How would we feel if we're being told that we're telling people we have a TBI, but nobody believes us? Or in my daughter's situation, she's laying on the bed and can no longer do things for herself. And she has to 100% solely rely on myself, my husband, my mom, and my dad, those that come in to help care for her, living their lives through our minds. You can contact us as our phone number, our email address, our website, and our P.O. Box number. We do not have a brick and mortar yet, but I'm believing that in the years to come, within the next 2 years, we will have a brick and mortar. But we do have a home office and we do have a P.O. Box. And that is how you contact us here at the NAJAS Foundation. And we do our best to respond to your emails within 24 hours. Please give us at least 24 hours to respond, because I am a full-time, I do have full-time employment, a wife, a mother, and everything else that comes along with my life, and the nonprofit organization, which is my baby, that I will not lose focus on. And I would like to thank you all for your attention, for watching the live and coming back and watching the replay. We have our Step into Hope Walk coming up on March the 11th, and you can register on our website. We also have sponsorship packages available, and we also have business ad prices available to put in our magazine. And if you're interested in having your business in our magazine, we can get that information over to you. And we look forward to next Thursday at 5 o'clock. And I look forward to connecting with you all. I love you all. Be blessed. Have a blessed evening. And whatever you do, make sure you consult God first before you take the step that you think you need to take.